Welcome back to this week's Mathcast podcast. Today we are joined by Chloe DaCosta from Year 8, who's going to join us to talk about a topic that from a surface level doesn't seem to really link in with maths. It's a topic of how to win the lottery, or just things that involve money and maths in general. And we're going to be talking a little bit about the statistics and how you can kind of figure out if it's a good bet to make, if it's a good gamble to have.
Okay, so I'm going to be speaking about a topic that I'm very interested in, and it's kind of a taboo thing here, but it's illegal, and the thing to know is that you shouldn't do it. But there are lots of interesting ties with maths, so that's why we're going to discuss it. How to win the lottery and the probability behind casino games. So I was reading Jordan Ellenberg's How Not to Be Wrong and looking at chapters concerning roulette wheels, the lottery, and Powerball, and I thought a lot of people do that because they want to get money, but most of the time they're scammed out of their money. And another way that people are often scammed out of their money, not here thankfully because it's illegal, is through gambling. And two very common gambling methods happen to be my two favorite games to win: roulette and poker. Over the break, I've gotten especially into poker, and my all-time high is winning 55 hands straight and the equivalent of over £73 million, if it was real money, which it wasn't.
Yeah, and I feel like as well, you mentioned Jordan Ellenberg's How to Not Be Wrong book, which I really enjoyed that book. It was really, really nice to read. And there were so many chapters covering this idea of money and maths, and how the maths behind kind of different games that involve money, which is kind of what we're going to be talking about today. And talking about, is it a good idea to enter the lottery or anything that involves you betting money in order to win more money?
Okay, so speaking about winning the lottery, I'm going to bring up a term which I didn't know before reading How Not to Be Wrong, and that is expected value. And after reading the book, I can tell my formerly uneducated self that expected value is not the value you expect. This is obviously quite confounding for me, as you can imagine, at the beginning of the chapter, due to the obvious oxymoronic paradox created in the statement, and I will explain it as if I am speaking to that variant of me. Expected value in the aspect of probability is the probability multiplied by the value of each outcome. For example, a 50% chance of winning $100 is worth $50 to you if you don't mind the risk. We can use this framework to work out if you should play the lottery. For example, if a lottery ticket costs £10 and you have a 0.000001 chance of winning £10 million, does it make sense to buy a ticket? As a result, it's nearly impossible to evaluate this question without using the concept of expected value. Having one of these tickets yields a value of £1, 0.000001 times 10 million for you. But you have to pay £10 for it, so there is a negative expected value, which is associated with having one, which basically means have some self-control and don't buy the ticket.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it into perspective. Like, the expected value is not the value you expect. Like, just because something may win you a lot of money doesn't mean it's actually going to win you a lot of money, because there's still such a small probability that it's going to happen, especially with the lottery, because there's such a big prize, and it's just like, come on, it's just one ticket. I'm not really going to lose that much. But if you keep on buying, how many tickets do you actually need to buy in order to have a pretty decent chance in order to win the lottery? And it's a very, very high amount of tickets that you will need to purchase.
So yeah, speaking about that, so we talk about probability a lot when we're talking about games like this. So talking about that here is one of my favorite games, which also involves a lot of probability: poker. Let's talk about pot odds in poker. Put simply, they're the ratio of the size of the pot to the size of the bet. Basically, if any of you don't know what the pot is, it's basically where you put any of your money, if you're playing it with money, which you shouldn't do here. Pot odds in a poker show the relation between the number of chips required on the call and the amount in the pot. Pot odds are expressed in percentages. They're equal to what the percentage of a total pot a player would invest during a call.
Don't worry if you don't really understand the technical kind of game side of it, because I personally don't play poker and I don't really understand too much of it, but I understand the maths behind it, and that's kind of what this podcast is going to cover.
And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explain basically the maths behind it. So for instance, your opponent bets £50 into a pot of £100 and you call, or otherwise known as match the bet, with £50 in the pot, then the pot odds will be 50 over 200 times 100, which equals 25% of the total pot. And we all know the basic hands in poker. Oh wait, we're not caffeine-powered 13-year-olds who fixate on the most random of things? Alright, then I'll explain for all of the sane people and or people who don't play poker that are watching this. You have these as your hands. High card, 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 of a kind, straight, flush, full house, 4 of a kind, straight flush, and the rarest one of all, the royal flush.
And if you were to calculate the poker odds of getting one of these hands in the game of poker, this is how it would go. So let's take the best hand in poker, which is the royal flush. The royal flush consists of A, K, J, and Q, and 10 of the same suit. Since the standard deck contains 4 suits, there are 4 different ways of making a hand. And therefore, the probability of being dealt the highest hand in poker is 4 divided by 2598960, which is equal to a very, very small number with a lot of zeros.
Okay, this very, very small number with a lot of zeros, just so that we can get you really memorizing these numbers so that you can tell your math teacher, I learned what the probability of getting a royal flush in poker is. Okay, so it's 0.000001539 or 0.0001539%. And that is why being dealt a royal flush is a very rare occurrence, because you don't even have a 1% chance of winning it. So why 2,598,960? It seems like the most random 7 numbers we could have picked out a Scrabble tile bag. It does exist, by the way. We're straying from the point anyways. Where did 2,598,960 come from? If you use a binomial coefficient, or the number of ways of picking unordered outcomes from the possibilities, also known as the possible combinations of a set of numbers, with the value of 52, because there are 52 cards in a deck, and 5, because 5 is the number of cards in that hand, then you get our formally random seeming number, 2,598,960.
And you need to be able to bluff effectively. Bluffing is when you bet or raise even though you do not have a good hand, to trick your opponents into thinking that you have a good hand. So this is where maths may be kind of not really used in poker, because it's more of a psychological trick.
And really, actually, when I first looked at poker, it was before I started being interested in math, so like year 6. I wasn't a horrible year 6, by the way. And believe it or not, like I did, there's also mathematics behind logically and intelligent lying. I love what the world has come to, don't you? And there's an easy formula that you can follow when you have to bluff to determine the bluff's break-even percentage. And that is how often it has to work to have a long-term neutral outcome. If your opponent folds more often than the break-even percentage, your bluff is profitable. And if they do not, it is a losing bluff. This is a simple formula. Risk divided by, bracket, risk plus reward, equals break-even percentage. Let's take a simple example. It is a $1 to $2 game, and you raise $6 from the cutoff pre-flop, or the 3 cards first shown, with 67. The big blind calls, and the flop is Ace, King, 9. You have completely missed, but you think that you can represent a big hand on this flop. The pot is now $13, and you decide to bet 7. So how often does this bluff have to work to break even? We are risking $7 to win a $13 pot. Using the formula that I've mentioned before, it would look like this. 7 pounds over 7 pounds plus 13 pounds would equal 35. So you are risking $7 to win $13, a little over half pot, which means that you only have to get this bluff right 35% of the time to break even. Given your read that you can represent a big ace or better, this seems like a really good bet. Of course, by betting small, you make it more enticing for your opponent to call. So what about if you decide to bet big to make it look like you are value betting a monster? Let's say you bet a full pot, so you bet 13 pounds to win 13 pounds.
So that would lead the formula to be 13 pounds divided by 13 pounds plus 13 pounds, which is equal to 50%, because 13 plus 13 is equal to 26, and 13 divided by 26 is equal to 50%. Now, you're going to have to be right half of the time to break even. So this is where it's important to have read your opponent. If they are tight or a weak player who folds a lot of the time, this may be a good bet. If they are a loose, passive player, it might be a losing bet. This is kind of where you don't really use maths in this, because it's just a little bit of knowing your opponent and
more. So thanks a lot, Hannah, for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope to see you next week.